I woke above a silent courtyard as rain touched my blue robes, the azure spirit soared in my hand, and every blood-dark stone below told me this nightmare now belonged only to me alone. I stared at the blade in my hand, unable to breathe, as broken memories rushed through my skull and forced one impossible truth into me. I had transmigrated into this world of death. I knew this world too well, because I had read its story on Blue Star, never imagining I would open my eyes inside it as the doomed villain carrying my own cursed name tonight, alive. My name was Gu Chengxing now, the monster from the novel, and I realized this was the day I destroyed the Shin family before the main plot even had a chance to begin here in the rain. I remembered the original story with a chill in my chest. Shin Ruochu survived this day, and my shadow would become the reason she refused to die whenever despair found her later on. From the eaves, I looked toward the residence gate, knowing what should happen next, yet still hoping the young heroine would somehow never step into this rain on this ruined night. I heard her laughter reach the courtyard before she did, bright and innocent, while her maid chased after her through the rain with helpless worry in every hurried step behind her. I saw the little girl rush inside, full of life, then freeze before the fallen Shin family, her joy breaking apart before a single word could save it from ruin before my eyes in time. I watched her call for her uncle, cousin, brother, mother, and father, each name tearing through the rain while no living voice answered her back from the courtyard below at my feet. I saw her kneel beside her mother and beg her to wake, blaming herself for leaving, and the cruelty of this scene sank deep into my bones while I stood above her under the black sky. I remembered the novel clearly. Whenever Shin Ruochu wanted to give up, this moment and my demonic silhouette would force her to keep walking through despair inside that cruel future. I thought of slipping away before she noticed me, hiding my presence from the story and pretending I had never stood above this ruined home while the rain hid my face from her below. Before I could move, a clear voice rang inside my mind, naming me host and telling me the villain selection had finally been triggered above this ruined courtyard in the cold rain. I studied the three choices in silence. One offered violent power, one mocked cowardice, and one demanded I face Shin Ruochu myself before the storm swallowed us beneath dark rain. I chose the third option because I knew the heavenly demon physique was not a gift, but a curse waiting to erase my reason and drag me down the same path before it stole my mind away. If keeping Shin Ruochu beside me could remove that hidden danger, then I would accept the trouble, even if the plot shattered in my hands before fate moved again beneath dark rain. Only then did I truly look at her, a crying child wrapped in spiritual light, fragile in grief yet strangely unbreakable, while the storm buried her small voice under the black sky. I watched the sky darken as her sobs faded into silent tears, and lightning split the clouds before heavy rain swallowed the courtyard and every sound around me under the cold sky. I saw Linger stagger forward through the storm, clutching fear inside her chest, forcing herself to lift her young miss before terror crushed them both beneath the merciless rain. Then she looked up and saw me on the eaves, blue robes soaked by rain, crimson eyes lowered toward them, demonic aura coiling above the ruined courtyard beneath the merciless rain. I stood above them on the eaves, letting rain fall over my blue robes while Linger finally saw the sword in my hand and understood what kind of monster had appeared before her now. I moved only one step, yet the distance vanished. In an instant I stood before Linger and Shin Ruochu, watching terror throw them backward across the wet courtyard stones around us. I kept my face cold as Linger fell and demanded my name, her anger shaking through the rain while I held back every answer that might break the villain mask I needed now in the storm. I looked at Linger in silence, remembering she would one day become legendary, yet right now she was only a trembling maid protecting the last child of the Shin family before my eyes. I released my aura and stepped closer, ready to speak, until Shin Ruochu lifted her tear-soaked face and called my name as if one last hope still clung to it beneath my rainy shadow. I saw her memory behind those swollen eyes, a blue-robed prodigy at the academy, her father's gentle explanation, and a child's bright wish to join my sect one day from that moment. I paused when she asked what had happened, because her face still carried pain, fear, and a fragile hope that I was not the demon standing before her in the rain beneath my shadow. I leaned closer and crushed that hope myself, telling her I was the enemy who killed her family while raising the azure spirit sword into the rain-washed courtyard light near her face. I watched her pupils shrink as the last hope broke. Hatred replaced grief, and her small voice accused me of killing her father and mother beneath the storm as rain buried her cry. I saw power born from despair as she broke from Linger's arms and rushed at me, a grieving child trying to tear down the monster she had just named with all the strength left in her. I heard Linger plead through her own hatred, begging me not to hurt her young miss, while Shin Ruochu cried for her not to bow before the murderer while rain hid their tears from me. I told Linger I would not kill her young miss, then cut deeper with the truth. Shin Ruochu's talent was useful, and I would take her away beside me alone beneath the ruined family sky. I watched Linger's terror turn into refusal. She clutched Shin Ruochu and tried to run, even after I warned her that silence was tied to the child's life with the storm closing in. I raised my hand lightly, and Linger collapsed unconscious in the rain, still trying to to hold Shin Ruachu, while the child scrambled up in panic and fear beside the fallen maiden Rain. I kept my cold mask in place and told Shin Ruachu her maid had only fainted, yet her trembling eyes showed she feared becoming truly alone in the world after losing everything else. I ordered her to come with me, but she lunged like a cornered cub, promising to kill me with bare hands that had no power to reach my throat, and I knew she could not touch me at all. I appeared beside her before she could resist, placed my hand over her head, and forced sleep into her mind while telling myself this cruelty would keep her alive under this cold rain. I caught her when she fainted and felt the fever burning through her small body, realizing grief and sickness had not stopped her from fighting me with everything beneath the rain. I returned to the eaves with Shun Ruachu in my arms, sensed movement in the capital, then covered the Shun residence in demonic spiritual chi behind me while the storm erased our tracks. I shielded Linger from the rain, left the capital with Shun Ruachu, and felt the system resolve the curse as my raging demonic aura finally obeyed me now for the first time tonight. I opened my eyes inside a strange inn and called for Mother before memory returned, turning the quiet room into proof that yesterday's nightmare had truly happened again in this life. No answer came, and panic pushed me upright. I searched the room, begging the world to prove the massacre was only a dream, but the silence answered first today with cold truth now. Then his voice came from behind me. I turned and saw Gu Chengxing by the window, blue robes still calm, and every buried memory tore open inside my chest again in pain before me. I stared at him without crying, because grief had burned past tears. Father and mother were gone, and the person before me had taken everything from my world forever in one night too. When I asked where he was taking me, his eyes slipped away from mine. His answer was cold and simple. The azure cloud sword sect awaited us beyond this lonely inn tonight. After he vanished from the room, I sat alone on the bed, hollow-eyed, staring at the window where the murderer had stood moments before, unable to wake from truth anymore. I went downstairs and ordered food for the child I had stolen, forcing my face to stay unreadable while guilt pressed harder than the rain outside the inn window beside me in silence. By the inn window, I listened as diners whispered that the Shin family had been wiped out by a hidden demonic cultivator, and the capital had fallen into fear overnight before me. I knew the rumors would spread, yet I was not afraid. Shin Ruachu and Linger would stay silent because survival now chained both of them to secrecy for now and later. I turned my thoughts to Transcendent Peak, my master Chen Wuxin, and the missing reason the original Gu Qingxing would one day kill the man who raised him alone in my mind. The novel had skipped too much. I only remembered guilt, death, and the heavenly demon physique, leaving me with questions that could destroy my future soon if ignored by me. Then a sharp hostile intent touched my senses. I stood at once, searching the inn, only to realize the killing intent was not aimed at me but at the child upstairs before me. I used Azure Cloud Shadow Step and returned to the room in an instant, finding Shin Ruachu unconscious while a black-clad figure reached for her small body on the bed before me. My sword flashed green through the room, forcing the intruder to drop his hand and meet my blade with a dagger as the inn shook from the sudden clash before me beneath the inn roof. The force drove me back half a step, and I understood his realm at once. A half-step nascent soul stood before me, stronger than my own cultivation by far today in that instant. I was not shocked for long. Only the heavenly divination sect could move this quickly for Shin Ruachu, guided by destiny and the dragon fortune in secret from birth before me. The system triggered again, offering cowardice, disaster, or escape. I already knew the answer because abandoning Shin Ruachu was never a real choice today for me before my eyes. I chose to protect her and moved before the assassin could react, using the speed I had mastered because the original Gu Qingxing had feared pain most since childhood before me. I slipped past him, gathered Shin Ruachu into my arms, and leapt through the window, leaving the black-clad man frozen in confusion behind us in the inn room beneath the inn roof. As I fled toward the Azure Cloud Sword sect, the system confirmed my reward, and Thunder Sword intent awakened like a silent spark inside my soul at last tonight beneath the inn roof. I carried Shin Ruachu through the mountains for 4 hours, driving Azure Cloud Shadow Step to its limit while the capital faded behind us like a storm I could not outrun. I found a clean patch of forest ground, spread a soft mat over it, and laid her down carefully, knowing the trouble beside me was already heavier than any sword. I watched her sleep with furrowed brows, trapped in some painful dream, and told myself this was only repayment for the debt this body had left behind for me. Her fever had not fully faded, and she had eaten nothing. I looked into the forest, searching for anything that could keep a grieving child alive one more night. I returned with 2 rabbits and wild vegetables, then gathered dry branches, letting Thunder Sword intent spark the fire that would cook our first meal in exile. With Wind Sword intent, I cleaned the rabbits in a single motion, then used the Azure Spirit Sword as a skewer, even though it once meant far more to this body. I remembered Chen Wuxin giving this sword to me at 9, a treasured gift from a master, and now I held it over flames like a fire poker without shame. When I heard the faint rustle behind me, I knew she had awakened, but I kept my eyes on the roasting meat and asked if she was awake as if nothing had changed. I asked if she was hungry, but silence answered me. The meat began to sizzle, and the smell drifted through the forest while hatred kept her still. I cooled the meat with spiritual chi and offered it to her, but she sat like a hollow doll, refusing even hunger until her stomach betrayed the truth between us. I told her I would not kill her and would wait for her to kill me, because hatred alone was useless unless she survived long enough to sharpen it into strength. I said I would bring her into the Azure Cloud Sword sect and maybe even take her as my disciple, but her cold answer cut through the firelight. Impossible. I made the rule clear. She could try to kill me anytime, but until she succeeded, she would obey me, and right now my first command was simple eat. I turned her grief into a blade, reminding her that if I walked free, she would need the strength to face me one day and answer for her own survival. She finally grabbed the rabbit with both hands and forced herself to eat, swallowing tears with every bite while promising that she would kill me one day. I watched without speaking, knowing she was crying yet enduring it, and all I could think was that she needed food before grief, cultivation, or revenge could begin. When she choked, I gathered dew in a broad leaf, cleansed and warmed it with thunder sword intent, then offered it before my cold mask could crack. She took the water without looking at me and drank it all. I understood her decision then and told her to follow me honestly back to Azure Cloud. Far away in the capital, inside Ascension Pavilion, a woman reported the failed mission while Granny Tianxiang sat beneath black hearse patterns and divined destiny. Granny Tianxiang declared destiny unchanged, ordered surveillance, and hinted that the hidden piece inside Azure Cloud Sword sect might soon be ready to move. I watched her force down every bite without tasting it, knowing she ate for only one reason now: to stay alive until the day her hatred could reach me. She was only 7, but the innocence inside her had died overnight. Before me sat a child emptied by loss, filled only with coldness and revenge. She refused to look at me, and I understood why. If her eyes met mine again, the urge to bite me apart might break through her last restraint. Inside her silence, my name carved itself deeper and deeper, becoming the only purpose left in her life. Gu Chengxing must die by her hands. Hatred exhausted her at last. She curled into herself and drifted into sleep, still wondering why I had left her alive instead of ending everything. I did not know the storm inside her heart. My thoughts were already on Azure Cloud Mountain, 5,000 kilometers away beyond the Great Zhou border. Traveling alone would be easy, but the child beside me made speed impossible. After thinking it through, I took out the pale blue spirit summoning flute. I played the flute gently, and spiritual mist poured from its holes, first pale white, then blue, carrying my request across impossible distance. The mist deepened from blue to purple, marking my request urgent. I stopped playing, astonished that a spiritual weapon could work like delivery. The message confirmed a top-tier crane rider had accepted, 12 hours away, with 10 medium-grade spirit stones due for the trip back to Azure Cloud. I thought of the immortal cranes, not merely mounts but official members of Azure Cloud, symbols of the sect alongside the sword itself since its founding. Then I remembered their future in the novel, slaughtered after my heavenly demon physique was exposed, until only scattered survivors remained under a ruined sky. Night settled over the forest, the moon rose, and the ashes dimmed. My mind finally calmed, but looking at Shin Ruochu made that calm break. Only 2 days had passed, yet it felt like half a month. I called the system and asked the question I feared most: could I still go home? The answer was cruelly simple. The day Ruochu became empress would be the day I returned, meaning I had to survive until her story reached its end. I smiled bitterly, thinking if death alone could send me home, I would have offered my life to her revenge and ended both our suffering at once. On impulse, I crouched beside her and gently rubbed her head, whispering that she had suffered too much and would need to wait before killing me. I promised only to try treating her better, because I was not fine either. Then I sat cross-legged and began circulating Azure Cloud art in silence. I guided refined spiritual energy into her fragile body, and when her furrowed brows eased slightly, I felt only a small, painful relief inside my chest. I wondered whether any world inside a story could truly be fake after our eyes had met, and silently wished little Ruochu would no longer grieve in dreams. I knew the desolate domain was vast yet poor, peaceful only because weakness forced restraint, while the great powers endured beneath heaven like blades kept in their sheaths. Azure Cloud, Medicine Immortal Valley, Great Zhou, Heavenly Divination, and other powers stood together, calm on the surface while hidden storms moved underneath. Far west, inside Demon Suppression Sect, Elder Kinju emerged from black smoke and told Su-Ri that traces of the heavenly demon physique had appeared. I could imagine Su-Ri's shock as he tore away his mask, no longer caring about the chamber's stench once that forbidden physique entered his ears. Kinju confirmed the aura, but the heavenly secrets had been concealed, leaving only a broken trail toward the northern region of the desolate domain. Su-Ri ordered disciples and hidden elders northward, because this rare chance might free Demon Suppression Sect from another demonic domain's control. At dawn, I finally heard the system announce Crane Ride 007, and a white figure crossed the wilderness with wings strong enough to bend the wind. Crane 007 landed before us, free-spirited and loud, while I measured its cultivation and saw why top-tier crane riders were never ordinary mounts. The crane told me I was famous now. Chun Wuxin's lifespan had reached its limit and Transcendent Peak's master seat had been passed to me. I swallowed my questions and lifted Shin Ruochu onto the crane's back, while her brief curiosity vanished the moment she noticed my eyes on her. When Crane 007 suspected I had kidnapped her, I claimed she was willing, then threatened a bad review before its righteous questions could grow sharper. The crane surrendered to fear of losing rank, but I could feel it secretly watching us, convinced justice required suspicion more than politeness. While mountains and rivers passed below, my mind stayed on Chen Wuxin. Lifespan exhaustion made no sense for a nascent soul master only 2,000 years old. I wondered whether the original body had caused his death, then looked at Shin Ruochu and felt the trouble beside me multiply without mercy. Azure Cloud Mountain finally appeared, wrapped in immortal mist, 6 great peaks rising around Azure Cloud Province like swords planted into heaven. Crane 007 shouted with joy and dove too sharply, but Shin Ruochu had no cultivation, so I caught her before the sky could throw her away. Pain bit through my chest as she sank her teeth into me, and I warned Crane 007 that another mistake would cost its precious rating. 007 became obedient at once and delivered us halfway up Transcendent Peak, but before leaving, it warned me not to harm the little girl. As the crane flew off, I remembered its true name, He-Chi, the future survivor of the immortal Crane clan and a force against my demonic fate. I looked down as Shin Ruochu glared through painful tears, healed the wound on her bitten tongue, and carried the trouble beside me toward my cave. I brought Shin Ruochu into Transcendent 001, expecting only a cave, yet the refined halls and dense spiritual chi felt like a hidden home prepared long ago by my master for me alone. I told her this cave was my master's gift and that its spiritual chi ranked near the top of Azure Cloud, but her blank silence answered every word I gave in return today without mercy. I showed her where to eat, where to sleep, and how to live here for now, while the cave's restrictions quietly sealed every path that might let her escape from me behind these walls. I turned to leave, pretending her silence meant acceptance, but a tiny shift in her face told me something had reached her before I vanished from Transcendent 001 in the quiet cave. After he disappeared, I stared at the empty cave, certain another voice had spoken inside my mind, clear and broken, whispering words I still could not understand in that cold place. The voice returned, repeating soul-suppressing stone until fear tightened my chest. I searched the cave alone, but nothing answered except the silence closing in around me in waves. I was still only a child, and the strange voice, the locked cave, and my ruined family crushed me at once until I slowly crouched down and hid my sobs inside my knees on the cold floor. I left the cave and headed for Azure Cloud Main Peak, but 2 inner disciples stopped me with respect, saying the sect master had waited for me for 2 full days before I arrived there. Their final words froze me. If I hurried, I might still see Master Chun one last time. I said nothing and drove my speed toward the main peak through sect roads at once without pause. I entered the sect master's hall and faced Jian Wushuang, asking about my master with a heavy heart, but his answer was only a quiet wave of profound power inside the great solemn hall. Darkness swallowed my sight, and when light returned, I stood in an unfamiliar void where only one blinding beam shone ahead with my master's familiar aura waiting for me there now. Then Master Chen's kind voice reached me, teasing that I could still shed tears, and the old emotions buried in this body rose until my throat trembled in the silent void before him. I walked toward the radiance and called him master, but he only told me not to think too much, saying his time had come and his soul would return to heaven before my eyes now alone. Warm light wrapped around me as he studied me one last time, pleased and relieved, while I failed to understand the hidden meaning behind his gentle words inside that radiance at all. I asked why less than a month had changed everything, since he had been well before I left, but he only laughed softly and told me to treat it as a strange trick without explaining why. He scolded me for being dull even after storms outside, and I heard the fading affection beneath every word as his voice grew softer inside the light as if saying farewell to me now. Before leaving, he told me to remember 16 words. Move with the wind, follow my heart, live in transcendence and joy, even the divine may fall before fate itself in time. The radiance burst open, and Chun Wuxin appeared as a pale old man, smiling with clear eyes as he raised his hand and placed it gently on my head beneath the white glow before me now. He patted me once and called me a little brat, telling me to make something of myself, while his illusory figure dissolved into the remaining white light before my helpless eyes today. I stared at the place where my master vanished, wanting to speak but unable to move, as the final meeting collapsed and my consciousness sank into sleep beneath the fading light. I woke inside the sect master's hall with my senses burning wide open, feeling heaven and earth press closer than before, as if the world had suddenly lowered its voice for me. When I looked inward, my golden core was gone, replaced by a translucent little figure seated in my dantian, proving I had crossed into nascent soul without warning. I raised one hand, and the surrounding spiritual chi answered like water pulled into a vortex. Power had come too easily, leaving me speechless instead of glad. The system system laid out my new state, middle stage nascent soul, heavenly demon physique, 3-sword intense, and a secret art meant only for desperate endings. When I saw Jian Wushuang still seated above the hall, my first question was about Master, but his raised hand stopped me before grief could speak. He told me not to ask what passed between Master and disciple, because he knew nothing, only that Chen Wuxin had truly left this world behind. I bowed because there was nothing else to do. The words had already fallen, and no amount of new power could pull Chen Wuxin back from heaven. Jian Wushuang said I was no weaker than ordinary elders now, and with Transcendent Peak empty, he asked whether I would inherit Master's seat. The villain choice appeared again, offering false humility, direct inheritance, or 3 years beside my Master's grave to temper my heart and sword. I chose the second path and refused the seat for now, saying I was too young and wished to guard Master's grave for 3 years in silence. The sect Master accepted, yet made one thing clear: Transcendent Peak would still fall to me eventually, not by Master's request, but by his own judgment. After I left, the hall fell silent, and Jian Wushuang closed his eyes, wishing Senior Chan a peaceful journey while finally understanding transcendence. Inside Transcendent 001, I steadied myself after crying and remembered the strange words that had echoed through my mind. Soul-suppressing stone. I searched the cave carefully and found a jet-black stone on the bed, crystalline like jade, quiet and cold, as if it had been waiting for my hand. The moment I touched it, cool warmth entered my soul, clearing sorrow and exhaustion enough for that cold woman's voice to speak again inside me. The voice told me to keep the stone while sleeping, promising that in 3 years she would help me take revenge, and hope struck me like lightning. I asked who she was, and the voice named herself Ji Liang from a world beyond mine, saying her awakening would become the moment of my rise. I knew trusting a stranger inside my body was dangerous, but without outside help, killing Gu Chengxing was impossible, and opportunity had always carried risk. So I smiled for the first time in days, not from joy, but from hatred, finding a path forward, bright, vivid, and faintly eerie in the quiet cave. I curled on the bed with the stone in my arms, and sleep dragged me back to thunder, dark clouds, and the nightmare figure who had destroyed my family. I brought her to the grave guarding forbidden ground, where thunder rolled above buried prodigies, and the old name of Transcendent Peak still breathed beneath black clouds tonight. I knew this youngest peak had once guarded graves alone, until countless buried talents fed its spiritual vein and turned a forgotten mountain into real sect power beneath azure cloud. Chen Wuxin had been the last gravekeeper and the first master of Transcendent Peak, yet the lonely lineage still passed down to only one disciple under that old silent rule. Tonight, that disciple was me, the sole true disciple of Transcendent Peak, while every other peak raised ranked heirs, inner disciples, and proud names beneath the same azure sky, unchanged. I told Shin Ruochu I would live here for 3 years, beneath thunder and restless shadows, while she watched me without understanding why I had dragged her to graves today alone. I asked if she remembered the path back, and though she wanted to ignore me, my serious face forced from her the smallest nod, one I could still perceive in guarded silence. From now on, I named her Yen Chu inside Azure Cloud, gave her a silver-white token, and allowed her to move freely through the sect while I remained among the graves alone. For now, I warned that Transcendent 001 was hers to use but not destroy, and that in 3 days she had to return here because I would personally teach her cultivation myself. In 3 days. The moment I said cultivation, disgust filled her face and she stepped back from me, but I only clicked my tongue, knowing refusal had never belonged to her in this place. Before me, I sent her from the forbidden ground with one wave, letting my voice follow after her. Learn the surroundings, and do not forget to return here in 3 days without fail. From me, outside the forbidden ground, a gentle girl called her junior sister Yen Chu, crouching with a warm smile that made even that cold child freeze in wary silence before her. At once, Lin Qing introduced herself as an inner disciple of Transcendent Peak, promised to care for her, and asked to be called senior sister with patient warmth beside the road. With care. When Shin Ruochu softly called her senior sister Lin Qing, the girl lit up, pinched her cheek gently, and asked her age as if the gloom around them meant nothing anymore. To her, again, Lin Qing pulled her away from that haunted place, promising tasty things in Azure Cloud Province, while the child let her small hand be taken and ran along after her quietly. At last, I sensed it from within and finally relaxed, because Lin Qing was kind, upright, and would one day help her, a small angel investor placed beside her lonely path for now. At last, then the system declared my choice complete, and rewards crashed into me as wind soared, intent peaked, thunder soared, intent deepened, and heaven shook around me in wild waves. At once, spiritual power poured into a blue vortex around me, cracking through my limits until late-stage nascent soul aura surged from my body like a rising tide beneath thunder. Above me, I stood in disbelief, realizing this strength could already support a peak master's seat, and the system had pushed me forward far too easily again without warning at all. Today, before me, while I cultivated in silence, my name erupted across Azure Cloud, with disciples whispering that Chen Wuxin had fallen and I would inherit his peak after 3 years. In whispers, I arrived with Lin Qing at the forbidden ground. Hearing her praise Gu Chengxing as kind, while I knew no kindness could erase what stood between us beneath the storm ahead in silence. She told me his guidance was a rare chance, like Chan Wuxin guiding him, but every word sharpened the distance in my heart, so I kept my eyes lowered in silence beneath the black sky. I thanked senior sister Lin Qing and stepped alone toward the gloom, letting my gentleness fade as weeds, thunder, and darkness swallowed the road with no path back behind me now alone. White light flashed across my eyes, and when it vanished, Gu Chengxing stood before me, studying my clean clothes, cold face, and hatred without fear or shame beneath his quiet gaze. He told me to follow and not wander, so I clenched my palm and walked behind him through broken ground, wild grass, pits, stones, and endless thunder, refusing to ask for mercy at last. Mud sucked at my feet while lightning split the sky, and one careless step sent me falling forward, staining my white clothes before I could steady myself under the weight of thunder. He knew I had fallen, yet he did not help. I struggled up alone, covered in mud, and found him watching quietly with eyes colder than the storm, and I swallowed my shame in silence. Neither of us spoke after that. He turned away, and I lowered my head, following him deeper for 2 hours through the forbidden ground under thunder while the storm watched above me. We reached a forest of nameless tombstones, where killing aura pressed against my skin, and the air itself seemed made to temper intent, blades, and hearts beneath the black clouds. He pointed to a blank tombstone on the far left and called it my target, as if a child without cultivation could wound stone by will in 7 cruel days beneath his silent stare alone. Dozens of low-grade spiritual weapons fell at my feet, and before I could react, a pill entered my mouth, forcing me to swallow his command with rage beneath the roaring sky at last. He said it was a fasting pill, then ordered me to mark the stone within 7 days by any means, while my silence hardened into cold resistance beside the silent graves in silence. When he mentioned Sister Linger in the capital, my anger froze into fear. Whether truth or lie, he had found the chain around my heart and pulled until I could not breathe in silence. I stared at the blank tombstone through mud and cold rage, calming my face until nothing showed, because weakness before him was another wound I refused, no matter how small I was then.